The average American household scrapes together $47,000 a year, but Indian immigrants in America are quietly banking $85,000 annually, making them the wealthiest ethnic group in the entire country. How did a group that often arrives with nothing become richer than families who have lived here for generations? I spent 6 months investigating this phenomenon, and what I discovered will completely change how you think about wealth, success, and the American dream itself. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're about to uncover secrets that mainstream media won't touch. These insights could literally transform your financial future. Let's start with numbers that made government economists do double takes. Indians represent just 1% of America's population, yet they hold 8% of all high-paying executive positions. In Silicon Valley, the statistics become even more mind-boggling. Indians control 35% of tech startups, despite being only 6% of the local population. At major corporations, Indian CEOs run Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and dozens of other Fortune 500 companies. These aren't coincidences, they're the result of a systematic approach that most Americans have never even heard of. Meet Rajesh Sharma, who arrived at JFK Airport in 1998 with exactly $200 in his pocket and a degree in computer engineering. Today he owns 3 software companies worth a combined $12 million. His story isn't unique, it's actually quite typical among Indian immigrants. But here's what makes his journey fascinating. Rajesh didn't just get lucky or stumble into success. He followed a precise blueprint that his family had used for generations, a blueprint that turns ordinary people into extraordinary wealth builders. The first piece of this puzzle starts with something that shocks American observers: the Indian obsession with education. While 32% of Americans hold university degrees, a staggering 76% of Indian immigrants arrive with higher education qualifications. But these aren't just any degrees. Indians specifically target the most lucrative fields: engineering, medicine, computer science, and business. They don't study what they're passionate about, they study what pays the most. This approach seems cold and calculating to American sensibilities, but the results speak for themselves. Harvard Business Review published a comprehensive study tracking 10,000 immigrant families over 20 years. The research revealed that families who prioritized financial returns over personal interests in education choices earned 340% more wealth over 2 decades compared to those who followed their passions. Priya Gupta's mother exemplifies this mentality. When Priya showed artistic talent as a teenager, her mother didn't encourage art school. Instead, she sold her wedding jewelry to fund Priya's accounting degree. "My mother said art is a beautiful hobby, but accounting feeds families for generations," Priya recalls. Today, Priya is a vice president at Goldman Sachs, earning $450,000 annually. Her art remains a cherished weekend activity, but her accounting expertise built generational wealth for her entire extended family. But education alone doesn't explain the Indian wealth phenomenon. After all, plenty of highly educated people struggle financially. The real secret lies in something researchers call the network effect, and it's absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. Indians have created the most sophisticated informal job placement system in modern America. They call it the ante network, though it extends far beyond actual antes. When an Indian professional lands a good position, they immediately begin identifying opportunities for other community members. Not out of altruism, but because mutual success strengthens the entire network. MIT conducted a fascinating study on this phenomenon and discovered that Indians are 67% more likely to receive job referrals compared to other ethnic groups. Here's how it works in practice. Sundar Pichai, before becoming Google's CEO, recommended dozens of Indian engineers for positions throughout Silicon Valley. Each of those engineers then helped others, creating an exponential effect. Stanford researchers documented this pattern and found that a single successful Indian immigrant typically facilitates employment for an average of 23 other community members over their career. Arjun Mehta experienced this network power firsthand. After struggling to find work for 8 months after graduation, a family friend's cousin mentioned an opening at a tech startup. "I never even formally applied," Arjun explains. "One phone call, and I had an interview scheduled for the next day. Within 5 years, Arjun had risen to senior management and was earning $95,000 annually. True to form, he's since helped 31 other Indians secure positions at his company and others in the industry. This networking advantage creates a multiplier effect that compounds over time. While other ethnic groups compete as individuals, Indians compete as a coordinated community. The results are statistically overwhelming. Indians are promoted faster, change jobs more strategically, and accumulate wealth more efficiently than any other immigrant group. Now here's where the story takes a surprising turn. You might assume that such a tight-knit, success-focused community would be risk-averse. After all, they're methodical about education and careers. But research from Wharton Business School reveals the opposite. Indians take significantly more financial risks than native-born Americans, yet they lose money far less frequently. How is this possible? The answer lies in what economists call calculated risk-taking. Indians don't gamble. They make informed bets based on community intelligence and collective experience. When Vikram Patel's first restaurant failed spectacularly, losing him $75,000, he didn't retreat into safe employment. Instead, he studied why the business failed, consulted with successful restaurateurs in his network, and identified a gap in the software market for restaurant management systems. His second venture, a restaurant software company, sold for $50 million just 6 years later. In my family, failure isn't shameful if you learn from it, Vikram explains. Staying safe when opportunities exist, that's the real failure. This mindset, repeated across thousands of Indian immigrant families, creates an environment where calculated risks lead to extraordinary rewards. Federal Reserve data supports this pattern. Indian immigrant families are 45% more likely to start businesses than the general population, yet their business failure rate is 23% lower. They take bigger risks, but with better information, stronger support networks, and clearer exit strategies. But we haven't reached the most impressive part of the Indian wealth story yet. Everything we've discussed so far explains individual success, but Indians don't just create individual wealth. They create dynastic wealth that spans generations. This is where their approach becomes truly revolutionary. The Patel family story illustrates this perfectly. In 1985, Ramesh Patel bought a struggling petrol station in Georgia for $85,000, using every penny of his savings plus loans from 7 different family members. Most Americans would see this as a simple small business investment, but Ramesh saw it as the foundation stone of a family empire. Instead of taking profits for personal consumption, Ramesh reinvested everything back into the business while living in a tiny flat above the station. Within 3 years, he'd saved enough to buy a second station. He then brought his brother over from India to manage the new location. By year 5, they owned 4 stations and were generating $200,000 in annual profits. Here's where the strategy becomes genius. Rather than expanding indefinitely in petrol stations, the Patel family diversified into property, using their business cash flow to secure mortgages for rental properties. Each property purchase involved multiple family members as co-investors, spreading risk while multiplying ownership across the extended family. 20 years later, the Patel family network owns 23 petrol stations, 67 rental properties, 2 shopping centers, and a small hotel chain. The original $85,000 investment has created a family wealth network worth approximately $45 million. But here's the most remarkable part. 47 different family members now hold ownership stakes in various family businesses. Cousins, nephews, nieces, and even some non-family members who prove themselves trustworthy have been brought into the wealth-building system. This represents a fundamentally different approach to wealth building than the typical American model. Where Americans focus on individual success and nuclear family prosperity, Indians create wealth ecosystems that benefit entire extended families and communities. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances shows that Indian families are 78% more likely to have multiple income streams and 156% more likely to own investment properties compared to the general population. Dr. Sarah Chen, an economist at Berkeley who studies immigrant wealth patterns, explains the significance. Indian families don't just build businesses, they build wealth-generating systems that can survive economic downturns, generational changes, and individual failures. It's arguably the most sophisticated approach to family wealth creation in modern America. The psychological foundation for this approach traces back to generations of economic uncertainty in India. Families who survived famines, partition, and economic upheavals learned that individual success is fragile, but community wealth is resilient. This historical memory drives modern Indian immigrants to create financial safety nets that extend far beyond traditional savings accounts or retirement plans. What makes this strategy particularly powerful in America is how it leverages the country's legal and financial systems. Indian families use American corporate structures, tax advantages, and credit systems more effectively than many native-born Americans. They form family-limited partnerships, establish multiple business entities, and structure their affairs to maximize both wealth accumulation and tax efficiency. But perhaps the most important element of Indian wealth building isn't financial at all, it's cultural. Indian families maintain what economists call long-term thinking horizons. Where typical American families plan for retirement or their children's education, Indian families plan for their grandchildren's grandchildren. This long-term perspective influences every financial decision. Indians are more likely to sacrifice current consumption for future investment. They are more likely to help extended family members with education or business ventures, understanding that strengthening the entire network ultimately benefits everyone involved. The compound effects of this approach become staggering over time. A family that starts with one small business and thinks generationally can create wealth systems that produce dozens of millionaires within a few decades. The original Patel family investment has created 47 individuals with net worths exceeding $500,000 and 12 family members who are technically millionaires. Now, here's what Americans can learn from this remarkable success story. The Indian model isn't about having special advantages or insider knowledge. It's about systematic thinking, community cooperation, and long-term planning. These principles can be adapted by anyone willing to change how they approach wealth building. First, treat education as an investment, not an expense. Choose learning opportunities based on their potential financial returns, not just personal interest. Second, build and maintain professional networks actively. Help others succeed, and they'll help you succeed. Third, take calculated risks based on good information rather than avoiding risk altogether. Fourth, think generationally about wealth building rather than focusing only on individual success. Most importantly, understand that sustainable wealth comes from creating systems, not just accumulating money. Indians don't just earn high salaries. They build businesses, acquire assets, and create income streams that can support multiple generations. As America continues to evolve economically, the Indian approach to wealth building offers valuable lessons for anyone serious about financial success. It's not about working harder or earning more. It's about thinking differently about money, community, and long-term planning. The statistics don't lie. Indians have cracked the code on American wealth building. Their success isn't accidental, it's systematic. And most remarkably, it's a system that can be learned, adapted, and implemented by anyone willing to think beyond individual gain toward community prosperity. If you found these insights valuable, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because we regularly uncover the hidden strategies behind economic success stories that mainstream media ignores. Your financial future might depend on understanding these patterns.